Commander Veltara stood before the main display screen of the science vessel Harmonious Thought, her three eyes narrowing as she studied the readings that made no sense. The soft blue glow of the instruments reflected off her silver skin, and the gentle hum of the ship's peaceful engines filled the quiet bridge. Around her, the crew of mixed species worked at their stations, all united under the banner of the Zafrani Collective, an alliance of 47 different civilizations that had come together in peace over the past 1,000 years. Commander, the readings are still incorrect, reported Science Officer Keln, his translator device converting his melodic language into standard collective speech. His forearms moved across the console with practiced ease. I have run the diagnostics 3 times. The equipment appears to be functioning properly, but the data cannot be accurate. Veltara moved closer to his station, her long fingers dancing across the controls to pull up the detailed scans. What she saw made her inner eyelid flicker with confusion. The sensors had detected a group of vessels approximately 30 million kilometers away, at the edge of what their star charts labeled as unexplored space, but the readings from those ships were impossible. The radiation signatures showed levels that would kill any known biological life within hours. The power outputs fluctuated wildly, jumping from near zero to massive spikes with no apparent pattern. The hull compositions seemed to shift between dense metals and lighter alloys in ways that violated basic physics. Even the thermal readings were wrong, showing heat concentrated in patterns that suggested the ships should be tearing themselves apart. These readings suggest the vessels are either unmanned drones operating under extreme conditions, or our sensors have suffered a cascade failure, Veltara said slowly. She had been a science commander for 30 years and she had never seen anything like this. Have we attempted to establish communication? No, Commander, replied Communications Officer Thren, her whiskers twitching with uncertainty. Standard protocol requires we verify the nature of the contact before initiating first contact procedures. If these are automated weapons platforms, we should maintain our distance. Veltara considered this carefully. The collective had encountered hostile species before, though such meetings were rare. Most civilizations that achieved space travel had learned the value of cooperation and peace. Those who had not were usually avoided, contained by mutual agreement of the peaceful species until they matured beyond their aggressive phase. Increase scan resolution, Veltara ordered. I want to know what we are dealing with. The sensors focused their attention on the mysterious fleet. The enhanced scans revealed 5 distinct vessels. One was significantly larger than the others, approximately 800 meters in length, with a design that looked both elegant and brutal. 4 smaller ships, each about 400 meters long, flanked it in a formation that suggested military precision. The ships were gray and white, with angular features that seemed designed to reduce sensor detection. But it was the detailed scans that made Veltara's breathing sacs contract with shock. Keln confirmed these readings immediately. Confirmed, Commander, Keln said, his voice tight with disbelief. I am detecting biological life signs aboard all 5 vessels. Multiple individuals on each ship. The readings suggest they are carbon-based life forms similar to Type 7 classification in our database. That is impossible, Veltara stated firmly. No carbon-based life form could survive those radiation levels. The exposure would destroy their cellular structure within hours, and the temperature variations alone would be lethal. The readings do not lie, Commander, Keln insisted. Whatever these beings are, they are alive and apparently functioning normally within those conditions. Veltara made a decision. The collective's primary mission was peaceful exploration and the welcoming of new species into the galactic community. If there was a chance that these were truly living beings, they had a duty to make contact. Initiate first contact protocols. Broadcast on all standard frequencies. Let them know we come in peace. The bridge fell silent as Thren activated the communication systems. The message went out in 17 different languages, each one representing a major civilization in this region of space. The message was simple. Greetings from the Zafrani Collective, an offer of friendship and a request for peaceful dialogue. For several long minutes there was no response. Veltara began to wonder if perhaps the ships were automated after all, or if the beings aboard did not possess the technology to receive their transmission. Then suddenly every screen on the bridge lit up with a new contact alert. Commander, all 5 vessels have changed course, reported the navigation officer. They are moving toward our position at high speed. Estimate contact in 45 minutes. Are they hostile? Veltara asked, her hand moving instinctively toward the shield activation controls. Unknown. They have not powered weapons, but their approach trajectory is aggressive. They are also broadcasting on multiple frequencies. Let me hear it. The bridge speakers crackled to life, and a voice filled the space. It was unlike anything Veltara had heard before, harsh and sharp, with sounds that seemed almost violent in their delivery. The translator struggled for a moment, then began converting the alien speech into something understandable. Unknown vessel, this is the UNSC Indomitable of the United Nations Space Command. You have entered human-controlled space without authorization. Identify yourself and state your intentions immediately. Failure to comply will be considered a hostile act. Human-controlled space? Veltara quickly accessed the collective's comprehensive database of known species and civilizations. She searched for any reference to humans or United Nations Space Command. The search came back empty. These beings were completely unknown to the collective, which should have been impossible. The collective's network of exploration vessels had been mapping this region for centuries. Respond immediately, Veltara ordered. Inform them we are peaceful explorers and mean no harm. Explain that we were unaware this region was claimed territory. Thren transmitted the message, and this time the response came within seconds. The voice was still sharp, but some of the aggression had faded. Harmonious thought, we receive your message. Be advised you are near several human colony systems. Our fleet is on patrol to protect those colonies. We will approach to visual range for identification. Do not power weapons or attempt to flee, or we will consider it a hostile act. Veltara felt her breathing sacs relax slightly. These humans seemed cautious but not immediately aggressive. That was promising. Acknowledge their message. Inform them we have no weapons to power. There was a pause after Thren sent that message, longer than before. When the human voice returned, it carried a note of what the translator interpreted as confusion. Harmonious thought, please clarify your last transmission. Did you say you have no weapons? That is correct, Veltara responded directly this time. The Zafrani Collective operates on principles of peace and cooperation. Our vessels are equipped only with defensive shields and sensors. We carry no offensive weapons. Another pause. Then understood, Harmonious thought. That is unusual, but noted. We will proceed with first contact protocols. Prepare to be scanned. The human ships came into visual range 17 minutes later. The main screen showed them in perfect detail, and Veltara found herself fascinated by their design. Where collective ships were smooth and curved, designed for efficiency and beauty, these human vessels looked like they were built for war. Every surface seemed to have a purpose, from the protruding sensor arrays to the angular armor plating to the rows of what could only be weapon emplacements. The largest ship, the Indomitable, was particularly impressive. Its hull was scarred and patched in several places, suggesting it had seen combat and survived. Large letters and numbers marked its sides, along with a symbol that showed a blue and green planet surrounded by olive branches. Commander, they are scanning us, Keln reported. Very thorough scans. Their sensor technology is quite advanced. Veltara nodded. Scan them in return. Let us learn what we can about our new neighbors. The data that came back from the scans was just as confusing as the initial readings. Now that the human ships were closer, the sensors could provide more detail, but that detail only raised more questions. The radiation levels inside those ships were indeed lethal by collective standards. The power systems appeared to be some form of controlled fusion reaction that would require massive shielding to protect biological life. The temperature variations suggested the humans preferred environments that most species would find uncomfortable. And yet the life signs were clear and strong. Hundreds of biological entities moved through those ships, apparently unbothered by conditions that should have killed them. Commander, we are receiving a transmission, Thren announced. Audio and visual. Put it on screen. The display changed to show the interior of what appeared to be a command center on the human ship. And there, standing in the center of the image, was a human. Veltara stared in fascination. The creature was bipedal, standing on two legs with two arms. Its body was covered in what appeared to be a blue and gray artificial skin, possibly a uniform. The head was small compared to its body, with only two eyes positioned close together. Hair dark brown in color covered the top of its head. The face was remarkably expressive, with mobile features that suggested a complex emotional range. But what struck Veltara most was how the human moved. There was a confidence in its stance, a readiness that suggested this being was always prepared for danger. Even in this peaceful contact, the human seemed coiled, ready to react to any threat. "I am Captain Elizabeth Morrison of the UNSC Indomitable," the human said. And Veltara noted that the voice matched the earlier transmissions. This was a female of the species, judging by the vocal patterns and physical structure. "On behalf of humanity and the United Nations Space Command, I welcome you to this region of space. We apologize for the aggressive approach, but we must protect our colonies." Veltara stepped forward, making sure she was visible on their transmission. "I am Commander Veltara of the science vessel Harmonious Thought, representing the Zafrani Collective. We are pleased to make contact with your species, Captain Morrison. We did not know this region was inhabited. Our star chart showed only unexplored space." Captain Morrison's expression changed, and the translator interpreted it as surprise. "How far does your collective's territory extend, Commander?" "We are an alliance of 47 species spanning approximately 8,000 light-years," Veltara explained. "Our mission is peaceful exploration and the unification of civilizations through cooperation and shared knowledge." The human's eyes widened, and she exchanged glances with other humans visible in the background. 47 species? That is remarkable. Humanity has only recently begun to expand beyond our home system. We have established colonies in 3 nearby systems, but we have not encountered any other intelligent life until now. This explained why the humans were unknown to the collective. They were a young species, just beginning to reach for the stars, but that made the sophistication of their vessels even more puzzling. It usually took species hundreds of years to develop the technology for interstellar travel, and even longer to build military vessels of this capability. "Captain Morrison, the Zafrani Collective would be honored to establish diplomatic relations with humanity," Veltara said formally. "It is our tradition to welcome new species and share our knowledge and friendship." Captain Morrison smiled, and Veltara found the expression strangely pleasant despite its alien nature. "We would welcome that as well, Commander. However, I should inform you that I need to report this contact to Earth Command and receive authorization before proceeding with full diplomatic protocols. In the meantime, perhaps we could arrange a cultural exchange? My crew and I would be interested in learning more about the collective, and I am sure you have questions about humanity." "That would be most acceptable," Veltara agreed. "Would you be willing to allow a delegation from my ship to visit yours? And we would welcome human visitors aboard the Harmonious Thought." Captain Morrison hesitated for just a moment, and Veltara saw a flicker of something in her expression. Caution? Concern? But then the human nodded. "Agreed, Commander. We will prepare to receive your delegation. I should warn you, however, that human ships are designed for human environmental needs. You may find the conditions uncomfortable." "We are prepared for variations in environment," Veltara assured her. "Our species has extensive experience with first contact situations. We will bring appropriate environmental suits if necessary." "Understood. We will transmit docking coordinates. Welcome to human space, Commander Veltara. I think this is the beginning of something important." As the transmission ended, Veltara felt a sense of excitement she had not experienced in years. First contact with a new species was always significant, but there was something about these humans that intrigued her. They were clearly advanced, clearly capable, and clearly cautious. But they were also willing to engage in dialogue and exchange. She just hoped that once they boarded the human vessel, the mystery of those impossible readings would finally make sense. The alternative, that the sensors were somehow correct and the humans actually thrived in conditions that should kill them, was too strange to believe. But as she looked at the scarred hull of the Indomitable on the main screen, Veltara had a feeling that humanity was about to teach the collective some very surprising lessons about survival in the universe. The shuttle bay doors of the UNSC Indomitable opened to receive the Zafrani delegation, and Veltara felt her environmental suit systems activate more aggressively. The readings from inside the human ship had not improved. If anything, the closer they got, the more alarming the data became. "Commander, I must again express my concern," Medical Officer Drin said through the suit's communication system. His voice carried a tremor of worry. "The radiation levels inside that vessel would be fatal to unprotected collective species within 3 hours. The atmospheric composition contains elevated levels of oxygen that could cause cellular damage over extended periods, and the background electromagnetic fields suggest their power systems are inadequately shielded. Your concerns are noted, Drin, Veltara replied calmly. But we are here for peaceful contact. Our suits will protect us. Besides, if the humans can survive in these conditions, surely we can manage for a brief visit. The shuttle touched down on the deck with a gentle bump, and through the transparent ports, Veltara could see a group of humans waiting to greet them. They wore no environmental suits. No protective gear at all, in fact, except for their uniforms. They simply stood there, breathing the air exposed to the radiation, apparently unconcerned. Veltara led her delegation of 5 down the shuttle's ramp. The first thing she noticed was the gravity. It was heavier than standard collective norm, pulling at her body in a way that made movement require more effort. The humans had evolved on a high-gravity world, it seemed. Captain Morrison stepped forward, still without any protective equipment, and extended her hand in what the collective's database had identified as a human greeting gesture. Veltara reached out with her own hand, mimicking the gesture, and felt the surprising strength in the human's grip. "Welcome aboard the Indomitable, Commander," Captain Morrison said warmly. "I apologize for the environmental conditions. We can adjust the gravity and atmosphere in our diplomatic spaces if needed." "That will not be necessary," Veltara assured her, though privately she was already feeling the strain. "We are equipped to handle the variations. Captain, may I introduce my delegation? Medical Officer Drin, Science Officer Keln, Cultural Liaison Mara, and Security Observer Tan." Captain Morrison introduced her own team, which included her First Officer Commander Chen, Chief Engineer Rodriguez, and Science Officer Dr. Okafor. Then she gestured toward the exit from the shuttle bay. "If you will follow me, I will give you a tour of our vessel. Please feel free to ask any questions." As they walked through the corridors of the Indomitable, Veltara found herself constantly distracted by her suit's warning displays. The radiation alarms kept chirping softly. The atmospheric analyzers kept flagging concerning chemical traces. The temperature fluctuated between ranges that the suit classified as uncomfortable and potentially harmful. And yet, the humans walked through it all without concern. They moved with easy confidence, their bodies apparently adapted to conditions that would hospitalize most collective species. "This is our primary corridor," Captain Morrison explained as they walked. "We call this the main spine of the ship. It runs from bow to stern and provides access to all major sections." Veltara noticed crew members passing by as they walked, humans of various sizes, shapes, and colors, all moving with purpose. Some nodded or smiled at the delegation, others simply went about their duties. What struck her most was the diversity. The collective prided itself on unity despite differences, but these humans seemed to celebrate their variations. "Captain, if I may ask," Science Officer Keln spoke up, his translator conveying his curiosity. "Our sensors indicate your ship's power system generates significant radiation, yet your crew seems unconcerned. How do you shield against it?" Captain Morrison exchanged a glance with Chief Engineer Rodriguez, who stepped forward to answer. "We do have shielding around the reactor cores, of course," Rodriguez explained. "But humans have a fairly high tolerance for radiation compared to some species, we're learning." "What levels are you detecting?" Keln consulted his portable scanner. "Approximately 15 millisieverts per hour in this corridor." Rodriguez nodded as if this was completely normal. "Yeah, that's about right for this section. It's well within safe limits for humans. We monitor exposure levels for crew members, and we rotate assignments to keep everyone's annual dose within acceptable ranges. Are your suits handling it okay?" "Yes," Veltara said slowly, trying to hide her shock. 15 millisieverts per hour was not well within safe limits by collective standards. That was emergency evacuation levels. But Rodriguez had spoken about it as casually as discussing the weather. They continued the tour, and each new section brought new impossibilities. The engine room was a maze of massive machinery, all of it running hot and loud. The humans working there wore protective gear, but even that gear would have been inadequate by collective standards. They were surrounded by magnetic fields strong enough to disrupt some electronic devices, yet they worked with practiced ease. The weapons deck was even more disturbing. Rows of missiles sat in their launch tubes, each one containing more explosive force than a collective defense station would use in a year. Railgun capacitors hummed with stored energy that could punch holes through asteroids. Point defense turrets tracked invisible targets with mechanical precision. "This is our main armory," Captain Morrison said, and Veltara noticed that the human's tone had become more serious, more proud. The Indomitable is a destroyer, designed for fleet engagements and colony defense. We can engage targets from extreme range with missiles, medium range with railguns, and close range with our laser point defense system. You carry enough weapons to destroy a small moon, Cultural Liaison Mara observed, her voice tight with concern. Captain, may I ask why humanity feels such weaponry is necessary? Captain Morrison's expression became somber. Because the universe is not always friendly, Liaison Mara. Humanity learned that lesson the hard way. We hope for peace, but we prepare for war. It is better to have these weapons and never use them than to need them and not have them. The tour continued to the crew quarters, and here Veltara received yet another shock. The rooms were small, efficient, and by collective standards quite harsh. The beds were thin mattresses on metal frames. The lighting was bright and white. The temperature was maintained at levels that Veltara's suit classified as cold. This is a standard enlisted crew quarters, Captain Morrison explained. 4 crew members share this space during long deployments. Officers have slightly larger private quarters, but not by much. Space is at a premium on military vessels. This seems quite Spartan, Veltara observed, using a human word she had learned from the database. Do your crew not require more comfortable accommodations? Commander Chen, the first officer, answered this time. Comfort is nice, Commander, but efficiency is more important on a warship. Our crew understands that. Besides, humans are adaptable. We can make ourselves comfortable in almost any environment. The delegation was then invited to the ship's galley, where the crew ate their meals. Captain Morrison offered them refreshments, though she warned that human food might not agree with their biology. Veltara politely declined, but she watched in fascination as Captain Morrison poured herself a dark liquid from a machine that hissed and steamed. This is coffee, Captain Morrison explained, taking a long drink of the steaming liquid. It is a beverage made from roasted plant beans. Many humans find it essential for maintaining alertness during long shifts. Medical Officer Drin's scanner beeped urgently, and he checked it with alarm. Captain, my scanner indicates that beverage contains significant amounts of caffeine, a mild toxin that affects neural function. Are you aware you are consuming poison? Captain Morrison paused mid-sip, then smiled with amusement. Caffeine is only toxic in very large doses, Doctor. In moderate amounts, it is a mild stimulant that helps us stay awake and focused. Humans have been drinking coffee for thousands of years. But the concentration, Drin protested weakly. That single cup contains enough caffeine to cause serious complications in most collective species. Good thing I am human, then, Captain Morrison said cheerfully, and took another drink. The cultural exchange continued with the Zephrani delegation, sharing information about the collective, its history, and its mission of peaceful exploration. The humans listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions about the various species and how they had come together. When it was time for the humans to visit the harmonious thought, Veltara felt both relief at leaving the harsh environment of the Indomitable and curiosity about how the humans would react to a proper collective vessel. The answer came quickly. Captain Morrison and her team arrived wearing light environmental suits that their sensors had determined would be necessary. The moment they stepped aboard the harmonious thought, Veltara could see their reactions. It is so quiet, Commander Chen said softly, almost reverently. And the air tastes sweet. The gravity is lighter too, Dr. Okafor added, taking experimental steps that carried her further than she intended. This is wonderful. Captain Morrison removed her helmet after checking her scanner and breathed deeply. Commander Veltara, your ship is beautiful. It feels peaceful here. Calm. Veltara felt a flush of pride as she showed them around the harmonious thought. Where the Indomitable was all hard angles and efficient brutality, her ship was curves and soft lighting. The corridors were wide and decorated with art from dozens of species. The crew quarters were spacious and comfortable, with adjustable gravity and atmosphere to suit individual preferences. The common areas included gardens where plants from various worlds grew in carefully maintained ecosystems. The humans marveled at everything, but Veltara noticed they also seemed slightly uncomfortable, as if the peace and comfort was unfamiliar to them. You have no weapons at all? Chief Engineer Rodriguez asked as they toured the engineering section. Not even for defense? We have shields, Veltara explained. They are quite powerful and can withstand significant damage. And we have very fast engines. Our philosophy is that if we encounter danger, we protect ourselves and escape. then call for help from nearby collective vessels. And if help does not arrive in time? Captain Morrison asked quietly. Veltara hesitated. It was a scenario she had never really considered. The collective was so vast, so interconnected, that help was always available. That has never happened, she finally said. The human captain nodded slowly but said nothing. There was a look in her eyes that suggested she was imagining scenarios where help might not come, where the harmonious thought might face danger alone. It was a disturbing thought. The tour concluded in the medical bay, where Dr. Drin eagerly showed the humans the collective's advanced medical technology. Healing chambers that could repair tissue damage in hours, diagnostic scanners that could detect diseases at the molecular level, regeneration therapy that could regrow lost limbs given enough time. Captain Morrison's team examined everything with professional interest, but it was Dr. Okafor who asked the question that changed the tone of the exchange. Dr. Drin, would it be possible for you to scan one of us? I am curious how human biology compares to collective species. Drin agreed enthusiastically, and Dr. Okafor lay down on the scanning bed. The machine hummed to life, and holographic displays filled the air with detailed imagery of the human's internal structure. And then Drin made a sound of distress that brought everyone rushing over. What is wrong? Captain Morrison demanded, her hand instinctively moving toward a weapon that was not there. Nothing is wrong with your officer, Drin said quickly. She is healthy, but her biology is extraordinary. Commander, look at this. Veltara studied the scans and felt her breathing sacs constrict with shock. The human immune system was like nothing she had ever seen. It was not just a defense against disease. It was a war machine, constantly battling invaders at the cellular level. Antibodies, white blood cells, inflammatory responses, all working in brutal efficiency to destroy anything identified as foreign. Your immune system is incredibly aggressive, Drin said with awe. It is as if your body is constantly at war with invisible enemies. This level of immune response would be considered a dangerous autoimmune condition in most collective species. But for humans it is normal? Veltara asked. Completely normal, Dr. Okafor confirmed. Earth is a planet with countless bacteria, viruses, parasites, and other microorganisms. Humans who did not have strong immune systems simply did not survive to reproduce. Evolution made us this way. Drin continued examining the scans, and each new discovery brought more exclamations of surprise. Human bones were dense and strong, designed to withstand the high gravity of their homeworld. Human muscles were efficient and powerful, capable of sustained effort that would exhaust most species. The human digestive system could process a wide variety of foods, including many substances that would be toxic to other species. Your people are survivors, Veltara said softly, finally understanding. You evolved not on a paradise world like most collective species, but on a world that tried to kill you. Every system in your body is designed for survival in harsh conditions. Captain Morrison nodded slowly. Earth is beautiful, Commander, but it is not gentle. Storms that can destroy cities, earthquakes that can reshape continents, diseases that can kill millions, predators that see humans as food. We survived all of it, generation after generation, until we became strong enough to master our world instead of simply enduring it. And when you reached for the stars, Veltara continued, you brought that survival instinct with you. Your ships are built to take damage because you expect to be damaged. Your weapons are overwhelming because you assume you will face enemies. Your environmental tolerances are broad because you evolved to handle extremes. We hope for the best, Captain Morrison said quietly. But we always prepare for the worst. It is the human way. A priority alert suddenly interrupted the exchange. Both ships received it simultaneously. A distress call from a Zephrani colony designated Talnara 4. The message was fragmentary, breaking up with interference, but the core information was clear. The colony was under attack by Kresh warships, a hostile species that had rejected collective membership decades ago. Veltara felt her body go cold. The Kresh were aggressive and territorial, but they had never directly attacked a collective colony before. This was a severe escalation. Commander, we must plot a course to the nearest collective fleet base immediately, Security Observer Tan said urgently. They can dispatch a proper defense force. How far is the nearest base? Captain Morrison asked, her tone suddenly sharp and focused. 4 days' travel at maximum speed, Veltara admitted. And how long before the Kresh destroy that colony? Captain Morrison pressed. Veltara did not answer. They both knew the truth. The colony would fall long before any collective fleet could arrive. Captain Morrison tapped her communicator. Morrison to all human vessels. Set course for Talnara 4 maximum speed. Combat alert status. I want weapon systems online and crews at battle stations in 15 minutes. Captain, what are you doing? Veltara asked, shocked. Captain Morrison looked at her with eyes that had suddenly become hard as steel. We are going to save those people, Commander. That is what humans do. But you have no obligation to help us, Veltara protested. We just met. This is not your fight. Innocent people are dying, Captain Morrison said simply. That makes it everyone's fight. Now, Commander, I need to know everything about these Kresh, their tactics, their weapons, their ships, because in a few hours, humanity is going to teach them a very important lesson about what happens when you attack the innocent. As the Zafrani delegation rushed back to their shuttle, Veltara felt a mixture of fear and hope. The humans were rushing toward a battle, toward danger as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Perhaps for them it was. The combined fleet of 5 human warships and 1 Zafrani science vessel hurtled through space at maximum speed, racing against time to reach Talnara 4 before it was too late. Veltara had returned to the harmonious thought, but Captain Morrison had insisted on maintaining an open communication channel between the ships. Now, as Veltara watched her displays, she could see the humans preparing for battle in ways that both fascinated and disturbed her. Commander, I need you to tell me everything about the Kresh. Captain Morrison's voice came through the speakers. On the visual display, Veltara could see the human captain standing on her bridge, surrounded by crew members working at a pace that seemed almost frantic. Their weapons, their tactics, their ship capabilities, every detail matters. Veltara pulled up the collective's files on the Kresh and began sharing them with the human fleet. The Kresh are a warrior culture, she explained. They rejected membership in the collective because they view peace as weakness. They have attacked collective shipping in the past, but always in small raids, never a direct assault on a colony. What changed? Commander Chen asked. The human first officer appeared on a secondary screen, her expression focused and serious. Unknown, Veltara admitted, but it does not matter now. What matters is stopping them. She brought up technical schematics of Kresh warships. They typically operate in groups of 3 to 5 vessels. Their ships are heavily armed with plasma cannons and missile systems. They prefer direct assault tactics, overwhelming their targets with firepower. Shields? Chief Engineer Rodriguez asked from somewhere off-screen. Yes, but not as advanced as collective technology. They rely more on armor plating than energy shields. Their philosophy is that offense is the best defense. Captain Morrison nodded thoughtfully. What about collective defense capabilities? How does a collective colony typically defend against attack? This was the question Veltara had been dreading. Collective colonies are protected by defensive satellites with shield generators and communication arrays. The strategy is to maintain shields until help can arrive from the nearest fleet base. We do not believe in maintaining large military forces. We prefer to invest in exploration and scientific advancement. There was a moment of silence from the human ships. Then Captain Morrison spoke carefully, as if trying to choose her words with diplomacy. Commander, I mean no offense, but that strategy assumes the enemy will give you time to call for help, and that help can arrive quickly enough. What if neither of those assumptions is true? Then the colony evacuates to underground shelters and waits for rescue, Veltara said, hearing the weakness in that plan even as she spoke it. And if the Kresh start bombarding the planet? Dr. Okafor asked quietly. Veltara did not answer. She did not need to. They all knew what would happen. The Kresh would simply pound the colony from orbit until nothing remained. It was a scenario the collective had never seriously prepared for, because they could not imagine a species being so brutal, so willing to commit what amounted to mass murder. But the humans could imagine it. Veltara could see it in their faces, in the way they moved and spoke. They had imagined such scenarios and planned for them. Perhaps they had even experienced them. All right, Captain Morrison said, her tone becoming brisk and military. Here is how this is going to work. The harmonious thought will remain at a safe distance and provide sensor support. Your sensors are more advanced than ours, and we will need that information advantage. The human fleet will engage the Kresh directly. Captain, there are only 5 human ships, Security Observer Tan protested. The Kresh typically operate with at least 3 warships, and each is comparable in size to your destroyer. The odds are not in your favor. The odds are never in our favor, observer, Captain Morrison replied with a slight smile. That is why humans learn to cheat. Rodriguez, give me a status report on all vessels. The chief engineer's voice came through clearly. Indomitable is at 98% combat readiness. Minor maintenance items, nothing critical. Frigates Thermopylae, Agincourt and Hastings are all green across the board. Frigate Alamo is reporting some issues with her starboard missile tubes. But they will be operational before engagement. Good, Chen. I want a combat plan that assumes we are facing at least 3 Kresh heavy cruisers. Use the tactical data Commander Veltara provided. I want options for both defensive and offensive scenarios. Aye, Captain. Tactical team is already running simulations. Veltara watched in amazement as the human crew worked. They moved with a speed and efficiency that seemed almost choreographed, each person knowing their role and executing it perfectly. But what struck her most was the undercurrent of excitement she detected in their voices. These humans were not afraid of the coming battle. If anything, they seemed energized by it. Captain Morrison, Veltara said slowly, your crew seems almost eager for this confrontation. Do humans enjoy combat? Captain Morrison considered the question carefully. Enjoy is the wrong word, Commander. We do not take pleasure in violence or death. But humans are at their best when facing challenges, when everything is on the line. Combat focuses the mind wonderfully. Every human on these ships knows that in a few hours, we will face an enemy that wants to kill us. That knowledge strips away all the distractions, all the petty concerns. All that matters is the mission. Save that colony. But you could die, Veltara pointed out. Your entire fleet could be destroyed. Yes, Captain Morrison agreed simply. We could. But that is true of every dangerous thing humans have ever done. Crossing oceans in wooden ships, climbing mountains that touch the sky, flying to our moon in metal capsules, building colonies on hostile worlds. There is always risk. Always danger. But we decided long ago that some things are worth dying for. Protecting innocent lives is one of those things. The journey to Tal Nara before took 6 hours at maximum speed. During that time, Veltara watched the human crews prepare for battle in ways that revealed just how different humans were from collective species. The weapons crews ran drill after drill, loading and unloading missiles with practice speed. The gun crews calibrated their rail guns to microscopic precision. The damage control teams rehearsed responses to hull breaches, fires, and system failures. Every crew member had multiple backup jobs, trained to fill in if their primary role became impossible. But it was the medical preparations that truly disturbed Veltara. She watched through shared video feeds as the human medical bays prepared for casualties. Dr. Okafor and her team set up trauma stations, prepared blood supplies, and readied surgical equipment. They were preparing for their own people to be wounded, to be hurt, possibly to die. And they did it with calm professionalism, as if this was just another normal day. Commander Veltara, we are receiving updated information from Tal Nara A4. Communications Officer Thren reported urgently. The colony's shields are at 40% and failing. They report 3 Kresh heavy cruisers in orbit, conducting systematic bombardment. Estimated time until shield collapse is 90 minutes. Human fleet, did you receive that? Veltara asked. We received it, Captain Morrison confirmed. All ships increase to emergency speed. We need to shave 20 minutes off our arrival time. I do not care what we have to burn out, we can repair it later. The human ship surged forward, their engines glowing brighter as they pushed beyond normal operational limits. Veltara's sensors detected dangerous heat buildups in their power systems, stress fractures forming in structural members, and a dozen other problems that should have forced them to reduce speed. But the humans kept pushing. They were willing to damage their own ships, risk their own safety, to arrive a few minutes faster. It was reckless. It was dangerous. It was thoroughly human. Approaching Tal Nara 4, the navigation officer reported. Estimate arrival in 10 minutes. Sensor range to target in 3 minutes. All ships battle stations, Captain Morrison ordered. Weapons hot, shields to maximum. Sensor officers, I want continuous updates on enemy positions and status. Combat control, initiate tactical network. Let us make sure we are all shooting at the right targets. Veltara watched as the human ships formed up into a combat formation that looked nothing like collective defensive patterns. Instead of clustering together for mutual shield support, the human ships spread out, creating a wide net with overlapping fields of fire. The Indomitable took the center position, with 2 frigates on each flank. Commander, our sensors are detecting the crash ships, Keln reported. 3 heavy cruisers exactly as the colony reported. They are in high orbit, using their plasma cannons to hammer the planetary shields. Wait, Commander, the colony shields are failing. They have collapsed. Human fleet, the colony shields are down, Veltara transmitted urgently. Acknowledged, Captain Morrison replied, and Veltara heard the tension in her voice for the first time. All ships combat speed. We are out of time. The human fleet burst into the Tal Nara system like an avenging swarm. Alarms immediately began screaming on the Harmonious Thought, as Veltara's sensors detected massive energy buildups on the human ships. Weapons that had been dormant activated in sequence. Missile tubes opened. Railgun capacitors charged to full power. Point defense systems came online and began tracking potential targets. The crash ships detected the new arrivals immediately. Veltara watched as they broke off their bombardment and began turning to face this new threat. They were large vessels, each one nearly a kilometer long with hulls bristling with weapons. They moved with ponderous grace, their massive engines pushing them into position. Crash vessels are hailing us, Thren reported. They are demanding we leave immediately or be destroyed. Tell them to surrender, Captain Morrison replied coldly. One chance. They leave now or we will remove them. Veltara felt her breathing sacs constrict with fear. The human was giving the Kresh an ultimatum. The Kresh, who outnumbered and outmassed the human fleet? It was either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. The Kresh response came in the form of plasma fire. All 3 cruisers opened up simultaneously, sending streams of superheated plasma arcing across space toward the human fleet. And that was when Veltara learned what human combat truly looked like. All ships, evasive pattern Delta, Captain Morrison ordered, her voice calm despite the incoming fire. Point defense, engage. The human ships scattered like startled fish, each one moving on a different vector. The plasma fire, which had been aimed at where the ships were, passed harmlessly through empty space. And then the human point defense systems opened fire, thousands of laser pulses per second, creating a web of light that intercepted any plasma bolts that came close. Frigates. Weapons free, Captain Morrison continued. Indomitable will provide targeting data. Let us show them what happens when you attack innocent people. The 4 frigates fired first, and Veltara watched in awe as railgun slugs accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed. There was no warning, no visible beam, just sudden impact as hypersonic projectiles slammed into the lead Kresh cruiser. Armor plating shattered. Internal explosions bloomed like flowers. The Kresh ship staggered, its shields flickering as they tried to absorb the kinetic energy. Good hits on target Alpha, someone reported. Multiple hull penetrations. They are venting atmosphere. Target Alpha is wounded but still functional, Captain Morrison said. Continue fire. Indomitable missile launch, full spread, targeting Beta. The destroyer's missile tubes spat out dozens of warheads, each one a streak of light accelerating toward the second Kresh cruiser. The Kresh tried to shoot them down, but there were too many targets. Some missiles were destroyed, but others got through, slamming into the hull and detonating with nuclear fury. Direct hits on target Beta. Their forward shields are down. Structural damage to bow section. Frigates, shift fire to target Gamma, Captain Morrison ordered. Do not let them coordinate their attacks. The battle became a deadly dance. The Kresh ships were powerful, but they were designed for overwhelming single targets with concentrated fire. Against the human fleet's speed and coordination, they struggled. Every time they focused on one human ship, the others would pour fire into them from different angles. Every time they tried to maneuver, the humans had already predicted their movement and positioned to exploit it. Veltara watched through her sensors as the Indomitable did something that should have been impossible. A Kresh plasma beam lanced toward the destroyer, a hit that would certainly penetrate shields and cause massive damage, but instead of dodging, the Indomitable rotated, presenting her heavily armored flank to the beam. The plasma carved a glowing wound across the hull, burning away armor and cutting deep into the ship's structure. Direct hit to Indomitable, Keln reported with alarm. Sections 12 through 15 are exposed to vacuum. Multiple casualties reported, but the Indomitable did not slow down, did not retreat. The damage control team sealed the breaches even as the ship continued to fight. Captain Morrison's voice came through the communication channel, slightly strained but still strong. Damage control, seal those sections. Medical, treat casualties. All other stations, continue firing. We are not done yet. Veltara realized with shock what had just happened. The human captain had deliberately taken that hit, sacrificing part of her own ship to close the distance to the crash vessel. And now, at close range, the Indomitable's railguns had a clear shot at the crash cruiser's vulnerable engineering section. "Fire," Captain Morrison ordered. The railguns spoke, and the crash ship's engines exploded in a cascade of secondary detonations. The cruiser went dark, dead in space, nothing but a drifting hulk. "Target Gamma is destroyed," someone reported with grim satisfaction. "Remaining targets?" Captain Morrison asked. "Target Alpha is retreating. Target Beta is still engaging, but her weapons are offline. She is trying to ram frigate Thermopylae. Thermopylae emergency evasion. All ships concentrate fire on Beta. Do not let her reach our ships." The human fleet turned as one and unleashed everything they had. Missiles, railgun slugs, and laser fire converged on the wounded crash cruiser. The ship tried to maneuver, tried to evade, but she was too damaged, too slow. The bombardment was relentless, and within seconds the cruiser broke apart, her hull unable to withstand the punishment. "Target Beta destroyed. Target Alpha has jumped to FTL. She is gone." "Cease fire," Captain Morrison ordered. "Damage reports. Casualty reports. And someone get me a status on that colony." Veltara sat in stunned silence. The battle had lasted less than 15 minutes. 3 crash-heavy cruisers, each one a match for any collective defense station, had been destroyed or driven off by 5 human ships that were supposed to be outmatched, and the humans had done it while taking damage themselves, while risking their lives, while protecting a colony they had no obligation to defend. "Commander Veltara, this is Captain Morrison. Can you send teams to the surface? The colony will need help with rescue and repair operations." Veltara found her voice. "Of course, Captain. We will send all available personnel. But Captain, what about your wounded? Your damaged ships?" "We will be fine, Commander. Humans are tough. We will patch the holes and bandage the wounded. It is what we do." There was a pause. "Commander, can you tell me something? How long would it have taken a collective fleet to arrive?" 3 more days, Veltara admitted quietly. "Then you better add those 3 days to the list of things humans just saved. Because in 3 days there would not have been a colony left to rescue." As the Harmonious Thought moved into orbit alongside the battered human fleet, Veltara looked at the scarred hulls of the destroyers and frigates, at the emergency repair teams already working on the damage, at the medical shuttles carrying wounded to larger facilities, and she understood something fundamental about humanity. The collective had achieved peace by avoiding conflict, by talking and negotiating and retreating when necessary. It was a good strategy for species that valued preservation above all else. But humans had achieved peace by being so dangerous, so capable, so willing to fight that others thought twice before threatening them. They did not seek war, but they would not run from it either. They would stand and fight for what they believed was right, even if it cost them dearly. Veltara had asked how humanity survived long enough to reach the stars. Now she had her answer. They survived because they were willing to pay the price of survival. They survived because they turned their weaknesses into strengths and their fears into weapons. They survived because they decided, somewhere in their violent history, that some things were worth more than survival itself. They survived because they were human, and humans did not give up. Ever. The aftermath of the Battle of Talnara IV revealed just how differently humans approached the concept of acceptable losses. While the Zephrani rescue teams worked on the planet's surface helping evacuate civilians and treat the injured, Veltara watched in fascination as the human crews dealt with their own damage. The UNSC Indomitable had taken significant hits during the battle. A whole section of her hull was exposed to space, with twisted metal and scorched armor marking where the crash plasma beam had carved through multiple decks. By collective standards, the ship should have been towed to a repair facility and declared non-operational for months. Instead, Captain Morrison had given the ship 4 hours to complete emergency repairs and return to combat readiness. "Commander, you should see this," Science Officer Keln said, his voice filled with disbelief. He transferred a video feed to Veltara's display, showing the human damage control teams at work. They moved through the vacuum of space in armored suits, cutting away damaged sections with plasma torches and welding new plates in place. It was crude work, nothing like the precise repairs a collective engineering team would perform. But it was fast, and more importantly, it was effective. The humans were not trying to restore the ship to perfect condition. They were just trying to make it functional enough to fight again. They are not even replacing the damaged systems. Keln observed. They are simply sealing the breaches and rerouting power around the destroyed sections. It is like putting a bandage on a wound instead of properly healing it. But it works, Veltara said quietly. And it is fast. In a prolonged conflict, that speed could mean the difference between survival and destruction. Inside the ship, the medical teams worked with similar efficiency. Dr. Okafor moved through the medical bay with practiced calm, treating injuries that ranged from minor burns to severe radiation exposure. Veltara had offered the assistance of the Harmonious Thoughts medical facilities, which were more advanced, but the human doctor had politely declined. "We take care of our own," Dr. Okafor had said simply, "but thank you for the offer." Now watching through the shared medical feeds, Veltara understood why. Human medicine was aggressive, almost violent by collective standards. Where collective doctors would use gentle regeneration therapies and careful tissue reconstruction, the humans used drugs that forced the body to heal faster, surgeries that cut and stitched with brutal efficiency, and treatments that caused pain in order to prevent worse damage. One particular case caught Veltara's attention. A young human male barely into adulthood by their standards had suffered severe burns across his arms and chest. Dr. Okafor treated the wounds with a combination of synthetic skin grafts and pain medication, then sent the young man back to light duty. He would be in pain for days, possibly weeks, but he could still function, still contribute to the ship's operations. "Does that not seem cruel?" Medical Officer Drin asked, watching the same feed. "To send an injured crew member back to work when he should be resting and healing?" "Cruel, perhaps," Veltara agreed, "but also practical. The Indomitable is still damaged and needs every crew member. That young human understands this and chooses to continue serving despite his pain. It is a kind of strength we do not often see in the collective." The colony on Tal Nara 4 was a different kind of disaster. The Kresh bombardment had destroyed several buildings, killed 32 colonists and injured hundreds more. The surviving population was traumatized, frightened, and demanding answers about why they had been attacked and why help had taken so long to arrive. Veltara transported down to the surface to assess the situation and found Captain Morrison already there, speaking with the colony administrator. The human captain was still wearing her uniform, which was now stained with sweat and streaked with carbon scoring from the battle. She looked exhausted but alert, her eyes constantly scanning for threats even in this supposedly safe location. "Administrator Kelnris, I understand your frustration," Captain Morrison was saying patiently. "But the important thing is that the Kresh have been driven off. Your colony is safe now." "Safe?" The administrator's voice rose with anger and fear. 32 of my people are dead. Our main power station is destroyed. Our communication array is barely functional. How is that safe?" "Because you are alive," Captain Morrison replied firmly. "Because your colony still exists. Because the children playing in that courtyard over there still have a future. That is what safe means, Administrator. Not perfect. Not undamaged, but alive and able to rebuild." The administrator seemed taken aback by the human's directness. In collective culture, such blunt speech would be considered rude. But Veltara was beginning to understand that humans valued honest clarity over polite evasion. "Captain Morrison speaks truth," Veltara interjected, stepping forward. "The Kresh could have destroyed this entire colony. They chose not to only because your fleet arrived in time. You should be thanking her, not berating her." The administrator's color shifted to a shade that indicated embarrassment. "You are correct, Commander. Captain Morrison, please forgive my outburst. My people and I are grateful for your intervention. Without you, we would all be dead." Captain Morrison's expression softened. "No apology necessary, Administrator. You have been through a terrible ordeal. My crew and I will help with the repairs and security for as long as you need us." Over the next several hours, Veltara watched as human engineering teams worked alongside collective colonists to restore basic services. The humans brought a level of creative problem-solving that continually surprised her. When the main power station proved too damaged to repair quickly, the humans rigged a temporary power grid using portable fusion generators from their ships. When the communication array could not be fixed with available parts, they jury-rigged a solution using components from 3 different systems that should not have been compatible. "How do you know how to do all of this?" Veltara asked Chief Engineer Rodriguez, who was elbow-deep in a damaged power conduit, somehow making collective technology work with human replacement parts. Rodriguez laughed. "Commander, Humans have been fixing broken things with improvised solutions since we invented tools. We call it making do. When you grow up on a world where everything is trying to kill you, you learn to be creative with limited resources. Plus, engineering school taught me that any problem can be solved if you are willing to think outside the box and accept that the solution might not be pretty. But this violates at least a dozen safety protocols, Veltara pointed out, looking at the tangle of wires and jury-rigged connections. Yep, Rodriguez agreed cheerfully. But it works, and it will keep working until you can get proper replacement parts from a collective supply station. Sometimes safe enough is better than perfect, but not ready yet. As the day progressed, more details about the Kresh attack became clear. The 3 cruisers had arrived without warning and immediately begun bombardment. They had targeted the colony's defenses first, then moved on to infrastructure and population centers. It was a deliberate terror attack, designed to send a message to the collective. Your colonies are vulnerable, and we can strike whenever we choose. This changes everything, Veltara said during a strategy meeting with Captain Morrison and several other officers from both fleets. The Kresh have never been this aggressive before. This was not a raid or a show of force. This was an attempt at genocide. The question is why, Commander Chen said, studying a holographic map of the region. What do the Kresh gain from attacking a random colony? Did they think the collective would not respond? The collective would have responded, Security Observer Tan said bitterly. In 3 days, by which time the colony would have been ashes and the Kresh long gone. This was a calculated attack based on knowledge of our response times and capabilities. Captain Morrison leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. So the Kresh were testing the collective's defenses. They wanted to see if they could hit a target and escape before any real military force could respond. Which means this was not a one-time attack. They are planning more. The implications of that statement hung in the air like a heavy weight. Veltara felt her breathing sacs constrict with fear. The collective had 47 member species spread across thousands of light years. How many colonies were vulnerable to this kind of hit-and-run attack? How many could be destroyed before the collective's slow-moving defense fleets could respond? We need to change our defensive strategy, Veltara said slowly. The Kresh have exposed a critical weakness in our approach. We have always assumed that peaceful intentions and defensive shields would be enough. We were wrong. The collective needs a rapid response force, Captain Morrison said firmly. Fast ships, well-armed, positioned at strategic locations throughout your territory. When an attack happens, they can respond in hours instead of days. The Collective Council will never approve that, Tan objected. It would require maintaining a permanent military force, something we have always rejected as contrary to our philosophy of peace. Your philosophy of peace does not stop the Kresh from killing your people, Captain Morrison pointed out bluntly. Look, I understand the collective's ideals. Peace is admirable, but peace without the ability to defend it is just hoping your enemies will be nice. And the Kresh are not nice. The discussion continued for hours, with the Zafrani officers struggling to reconcile their peaceful philosophy with the brutal reality that Captain Morrison kept forcing them to face. Veltara found herself caught between 2 worldviews. The collective's way had worked for 1,000 years, bringing together dozens of species in harmony. But that harmony had been purchased with isolation from truly hostile forces, with defensive strategies that assumed enemies would be reasonable. The Kresh were not reasonable, and if they were growing bolder, the collective would need to adapt or die. It was late in the local day cycle when Veltara found Captain Morrison standing alone near the colony's memorial garden, where the names of the 32 dead had been inscribed on a simple monument. The human was silent, her head bowed, and Veltara realized she was paying respects to people she had never met, people who were not even her species. Captain, you saved thousands of lives today, Veltara said softly, approaching. Those 32 deaths are not your fault. I know, Captain Morrison replied, her voice quiet. But I also know that if we had arrived 10 minutes later, it would have been 33, or 50, or 100. Every second matters in combat, Commander. Every decision has weight. I chose to push our engines beyond safe limits to arrive faster. That decision saved lives, but it also means I am responsible for every life we could not save. That is an impossible burden to carry, Veltara observed. Yes, Captain Morrison agreed. But it is the burden of command, the burden of being human. We do not get to choose only the easy decisions, Commander. We do not get to only fight battles we know we can win. We have to fight when it matters, when lives are at stake, even if the odds are against us, even if we might lose. Because the alternative is to do nothing, and that is something humans cannot accept. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the sun set over the damaged colony. In the distance, human and Zafrani workers continued, their repairs working together despite their differences, united by a common goal of restoration and protection. Captain Morrison, I have been thinking about what you said, Veltara began carefully, about the collective needing to change our approach to defense. You are right. But such changes will take time. The Council must debate, consensus must be reached, resources must be allocated. It could be months or even years before any real changes are implemented. And in the meantime, the Kresh will keep attacking. Captain Morrison finished the thought. Yes. Veltara took a deep breath, preparing to make a request that went against everything she had been taught. Captain, would humanity be willing to help? Not just with this one colony, but with the collective as a whole? We could offer technology sharing, resource access, cultural exchange. In return, you could help us establish better defenses, train. Our security forces provide rapid response capability until we can build our own. Captain Morrison turned to look at her directly. Commander, are you asking humanity to become the collective's military arm? No, Veltara said quickly. I am asking humanity to become the collective's teachers. Teach us what you know about survival, about defense, about the hard choices that must be made when peace fails. We have much to learn from your species, Captain. Lessons paid for in human blood over your long history. We would be honored if you would share those lessons, so that we do not have to learn them the same painful way. Captain Morrison considered this for a long moment. I cannot make that decision alone, Commander. I will need to consult with Earth Command. But personally, I think it is a good idea. Humanity could benefit from the collective's knowledge and friendship as much as you could benefit from our experience with warfare. We could learn from each other. Then let us hope our leaders are as wise as we are, Veltara said with a gesture that conveyed hope and determination. As they walked back toward the command center, Veltara realized that something fundamental had changed in her understanding of the universe. The collective had always believed that civilizations matured by moving away from violence, that peace was the natural end state of intelligent evolution. But humanity had shown her a different truth. Peace was not the absence of violence. It was the choice to use violence only when necessary, in defense of those who could not defend themselves. It was the willingness to pay the terrible price of survival so that others would not have to. The collective had achieved peace by avoiding war. Humanity had achieved peace by becoming so skilled at war that others feared to start one. Both approaches had value. Perhaps working together, they could find a better way, a way that combined the collective's idealism with humanity's realism, a way that honored both peace and the sometimes necessary violence required to protect it. It was a strange thought for a Zafrani science officer who had spent her career exploring in the name of peaceful cooperation. But then, these were strange times, times that called for new thinking, new alliances, new approaches to old problems, times that called for the unique combination of collective wisdom and human determination, times that would test whether peace and strength could coexist, or whether the galaxy would force every species to choose between the two. 3 weeks had passed since the Battle of Talnara IV, and the galaxy was still adjusting to the implications of humanity's dramatic entrance onto the interstellar stage. Veltara stood in the Grand Assembly Hall of the Zafrani Collective's Central Council Station, watching as representatives from 47 species debated the question that had dominated every discussion since the battle: what to do about humanity. The council chamber was a magnificent structure, designed to represent the unity and diversity of the collective. Each species had their own section with customized environments, from the water-filled tanks of the Aquari delegates to the high-pressure chambers of the Densari. Holographic displays floated throughout the space, showing real-time translations of the proceedings in hundreds of languages. But today, all attention was focused on a simple podium at the center of the chamber, where Captain Elizabeth Morrison stood in her dress uniform, flanked by Commander Chen and Dr. Okafor. The three humans looked small and alone among the assembled representatives of advanced civilizations that had been traveling the stars for centuries. Yet somehow, they did not look weak. The chair recognizes Speaker Velnath of the High Council, the chamber moderator announced. A elderly Zafrani with silver skin that had faded to pale gray stepped forward. Speaker Velnath had served on the council for over 60 years and was widely respected for his wisdom and caution. He looked at the human delegation with an expression that Veltara could not quite interpret. Captain Morrison, humanity has asked to join the Zafrani Collective as a member species with full rights and responsibilities. This is an honor we do not grant lightly. Before the council can make this decision, we must understand your people better. Tell us about Earth. Tell us about how humanity came to be what you are. Captain Morrison nodded respectfully and activated a holographic display. The image of a blue and green planet appeared, slowly rotating, beautiful and vibrant with life. This is Earth, Captain Morrison began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. Our homeworld. To human eyes, it is the most beautiful place in the universe, but to the rest of the galaxy, I am told, it is classified as something else. What do your records call it, Speaker? Veltara watched as Velnath consulted a datapad, his expression becoming troubled. The Collective's planetary classification system would designate Earth as a Class 12 death world, the highest hazard rating in our system. Counselor Morrison, our xenobiologists believed that planets like Earth could not support the evolution of spacefaring intelligence. The environmental pressures would be too extreme. And yet here we stand, Captain Morrison said simply. She changed the holographic display to show various scenes from Earth. Towering mountains that pierced the clouds, vast oceans whipped by massive storms, dense jungles teeming with predators, frozen wastelands where temperatures dropped to levels that would kill most collective species in minutes. Earth is beautiful, but it is not gentle, Captain Morrison continued. Let me give you some context. The atmospheric pressure at sea level on Earth is approximately 100 kilopascals. The oxygen content is 21%. The gravity is 9.8 meters per second squared. These are the conditions humans evolved in. These are the conditions we consider normal. There were murmurs throughout the chamber. Several species consulted their own databases, and Veltara could hear the shocked reactions as they realized what those numbers meant. Earth's atmosphere was thick and oxygen-rich compared to most inhabited worlds. The gravity was crushing by many species standards. Humans had evolved in conditions that would exhaust or kill most other intelligent species. But the environment is only part of the story, Captain Morrison went on. Earth is a planet of extremes. Temperatures can vary from -90 degrees Celsius at the poles to +60 degrees Celsius in the deserts. We have hurricanes with wind speeds exceeding 300 kilometers per hour, earthquakes that can level entire cities, tsunamis that can travel across oceans and destroy coastlines, volcanic eruptions that can alter the global climate for years. The holographic display showed images of these disasters. A hurricane from space, a massive spiral of clouds hundreds of kilometers wide, an earthquake's aftermath, showing collapsed buildings and devastated infrastructure, a volcanic eruption with rivers of lava and clouds of ash blotting out the sun. And that is just the geology, Captain Morrison said, her voice becoming quieter, more intense. Then there are the biological hazards. Earth is home to millions of species, and many of them are dangerous to humans. We have predators that can run faster than we can. Predators that are stronger than we are. Predators that can kill with venom or disease. We have bacteria and viruses that can cause plagues killing millions. More images appeared. A large feline predator bringing down prey twice its size. A venomous snake, its fangs dripping with toxin. Microscopic images of bacteria and viruses. Beautiful and deadly. So how did humanity survive? Dr. Okafor stepped forward to continue the presentation. Not through physical superiority. Many Earth species are stronger, faster, or more resilient than humans. We survive through adaptation, innovation, and cooperation. We learn to make tools to compensate for our physical weaknesses. We learn to use fire for warmth and protection. We learn to build shelters against the storms. We learn to work together because a human alone is vulnerable, but humans in groups are formidable. But most importantly, Commander Chen added, we learned to see challenges not as reasons to give up, but as problems to be solved. Every disaster taught us something. Every predator made us smarter. Every disease forced us to develop better medicine. Earth tried to kill us for hundreds of thousands of years, and we refused to die. We adapted. We survived. We thrived. Speaker Velnath raised a hand. This is all very dramatic, Captain Morrison. But what does it have to do with your request to join the collective? Are you simply trying to impress us with tales of your harsh homeworld? No, Speaker, Captain Morrison replied. I am trying to help you understand why our ships confused your sensors, why our environmental tolerances seem impossible, why we fight the way we do. Everything about humanity that seems strange or excessive to the collective makes perfect sense when you understand where we came from. She brought up new images, showing human ships under construction. Our ships can function in high radiation environments because we evolved under a sun that bombards Earth with radiation. Our life support systems can handle wide temperature variations because we evolved on a planet with extreme climate shifts. Our medical technology is aggressive because we evolved fighting constantly against diseases and injuries. Our damage control procedures assume catastrophic failures because we evolved in a world where catastrophic failures happened regularly. And your weapons? A voice called out from the Pacifari delegation. Your willingness to engage in violence? Did Earth teach you that as well? Captain Morrison's expression became somber. Yes, Earth taught us that sometimes violence is necessary for survival. We had predators that would hunt us. We had other human tribes that competed with us for resources. We had diseases that killed without mercy. We learned that running was sometimes the right answer, but sometimes you had to stand and fight. Not because we wanted to, but because the alternative was extinction. She paused, letting that word hang in the air. But Earth also taught us something else. It taught us compassion. Because we knew what it felt like to suffer, we learned to help those who were suffering. Because we knew what it felt like to be hunted, we learned to protect the vulnerable. Because we knew what it felt like to lose loved ones, we learned to value every life. Our capacity for violence is matched only by our capacity for empathy. The holographic display changed again, now showing images of human culture, art, music, architecture, scientists working in laboratories, teachers with students, medical workers helping the sick, rescue teams pulling survivors from disaster zones. We are not just warriors, Captain Morrison said softly. We are dreamers. We create beauty. We seek knowledge. We care for our sick and elderly. We protect our young. We tell stories and make music and build things that will outlast us. Yes, we can fight. Yes, we can be dangerous. But we fight to protect what we love, and we are dangerous only to those who threaten the innocent. Beltara watched the council members as they absorbed this information. Some looked troubled. Some looked fascinated. A few looked frightened. But all of them were paying attention in a way they rarely did during routine council sessions. I have a question, came a voice from the crystalline delegation. The speaker was a being of living crystal, refracting light in beautiful patterns as they moved. Captain Morrison, you say your species fights to protect the innocent. But who decides what is innocent? Who decides when violence is justified? These are subjective judgments, are they not? They are, Captain Morrison agreed. And humans have made terrible mistakes throughout our history. We have fought wars for bad reasons. We have killed innocents. We have let fear and anger guide us when wisdom should have prevailed. Our history is full of darkness as well as light. This admission caused a stir in the chamber. It was unusual for a species to acknowledge their failures so openly. But we learn from our mistakes. Commander Chen stepped forward again. Every war teaches us the cost of conflict. Every innocent death reminds us of the responsibility that comes with power. We are not perfect and we do not claim to be, but we are always trying to be better than we were. That is the human way as well. Constant improvement, constant growth, constant striving toward ideals we may never fully reach. Speaker Velnath stood again. Captain Morrison, I must be frank with you. There are many on this council who fear humanity. They see your weapons, your willingness to fight, your adaptation to a death world, and they see a threat. They worry that bringing humanity into the collective will corrupt our principles of peace and harmony. How do you respond to these fears? Captain Morrison met his gaze steadily. I would say their fears are not entirely unreasonable, Speaker. Humanity is different from the collective species. We do approach problems differently. We are more comfortable with risk, with conflict, with the hard choices that peaceful species prefer to avoid. But I would also say this. The Kresh attacked Talnara 4 because they knew the collective was not prepared to respond quickly. They knew your philosophy of peace made you vulnerable. We did not corrupt your principles by saving that colony. We protected them. There is no peace if there is no one left alive to enjoy it. So you believe the collective needs humanity's warrior spirit? Velnath pressed. I believe the collective needs balance, Captain Morrison replied. You have achieved something remarkable. 47 species working together in harmony. That is beautiful. That is valuable. But it is also fragile. One aggressive species like the Kresh can shatter that harmony if you are not prepared to defend it. You do not need to become warriors yourselves, but you do need to understand that peace is not the natural state of the universe. Peace is something that must be protected, sometimes with force. There was a long silence in the chamber. Veltara could see the council members debating among themselves, their body language and expressions revealing the depth of their internal struggle. Everything Captain Morrison had said challenged core collective beliefs. But everything she had said was also demonstrably true. Finally, a new voice spoke. It was High Counselor Mershen, the most senior member of the council and rarely involved in day-to-day debates. When Mershen spoke, everyone listened. Captain Morrison, I am 147 years old. I have served on this council for 70 years. In that time, I have seen the collective grow and prosper. I have seen peace prevail. But I have also seen us grow complacent. We assumed that because we chose peace, others would as well. The attack on Talnara 4 proved we were wrong. The ancient counselor moved slowly toward the center of the chamber, approaching the human delegation. I have reviewed the combat recordings from the battle. I have seen how your fleet fought. I have seen how you deliberately took damage to protect our people. I have seen how you risked your lives for a colony you had no obligation to defend. And I have reached a conclusion. Mershen stopped directly in front of Captain Morrison. Humanity is dangerous. You are warriors born from a world that forced you to become strong. You carry weapons that could devastate worlds. You fight with a ferocity that terrifies us. All of this is true. But you are also heroes. You are protectors. You are people who will stand between the innocent and the darkness regardless of the cost to yourselves. The collective needs people like you, not to replace our principles but to defend them when our principles are not enough. The counselor turned to address the full chamber. I vote to accept humanity into the Zafrani collective as full members. Furthermore, I propose we establish a joint defense initiative, combining collective technology and resources with human tactical expertise. We will learn from each other. The collective will teach humanity the value of diplomacy and cooperation. Humanity will teach the collective that peace and strength are not opposites but partners. The debate that followed was intense and went on for hours, but in the end the vote was clear. 39 species voted in favor of accepting humanity. 6 voted against. 2 abstained. It was enough. Humanity would join the collective. As the formal ceremonies concluded and the chamber began to empty, Veltara approached Captain Morrison. The human looked exhausted but pleased. Congratulations, Captain, Veltara said warmly. You have become part of something larger than any single species. I hope humanity finds a home in the collective. Thank you, Commander, Captain Morrison replied. And thank you for vouching for us. I know you put your reputation on the line to support our membership. It was the right thing to do, Veltara said simply. You saved Talnara Arfor. You showed us truths we needed to see. The collective is better for having humanity as members. Over the following weeks, the integration began. Human liaison officers were assigned to collective vessels. Collective scientists began working on Earth and human colonies. Joint training exercises were scheduled. Technology exchanges were initiated, but more importantly, friendships began to form. Humans and collective species started to understand each other, to appreciate each other's differences, to learn from each other's perspectives. Veltara found herself assigned as the primary Zafrani liaison to the human fleet, working closely with Captain Morrison on the Joint Defense Initiative. It was challenging work, trying to bridge the gap between human military thinking and collective philosophical principles, but it was also rewarding. One evening, Veltara and Captain Morrison sat in the observation lounge of the Harmonious Thought, looking out at the stars. Both ships, Human and Zafrani, were in orbit around a beautiful nebula conducting joint training exercises. Can I ask you something personal, Captain? Feltara said after a long, comfortable silence. Of course, Commander. We are friends now. Call me Elizabeth. Elizabeth, then. When you first encountered the creche at Talnara before, were you afraid? Elizabeth considered the question carefully.
Yes, I was terrified.
We were outnumbered and outgunned. The smart tactical choice would have been to call for reinforcements and wait. But those colonists did not have time to wait. So we went anyway, knowing we might not survive. How do you function with that kind of fear? Feltara asked. How do you make decisions when you are afraid? That is the secret, Commander. You do not wait until you are not afraid. You act despite the fear. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is doing what needs to be done even when you are terrified. Every human who has ever done something brave has been afraid. We just do not let the fear stop us. Feltara absorbed this wisdom. It was so different from collective teaching, which emphasized calm rationality and careful deliberation, but she could see the value in it. Sometimes there was no time for calm deliberation. Sometimes you had to act on instinct and hope it was enough. The collective has much to learn from humanity, Feltara said thoughtfully. And humanity has much to learn from the collective, Elizabeth replied. Your people have achieved something we are still working toward. You have peace without having to constantly fight for it. You have cooperation across species barriers that humans still struggle with among ourselves. You have turned the desire for knowledge and exploration into a civilization-wide purpose. These are lessons we need. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the nebula's colors shift and swirl. Two species from very different worlds finding common ground among the stars. Months passed, and the partnership between humanity and the collective deepened. The Joint Defense Initiative proved remarkably successful. Human-designed rapid response ships built with collective technology and crewed by mixed species teams were stationed throughout collective space. When the creche attempted another raid on a different colony, the response force arrived within hours and drove them off with minimal casualties. The message was clear. The collective was no longer an easy target. But the partnership was not just military. Human artists collaborated with collective cultural figures to create works that blended perspectives. Human scientists worked with collective researchers on projects neither could have completed alone. Human philosophers debated with collective thinkers about the nature of peace, violence, and morality. And slowly both sides changed. The collective began to understand that strength and peace were not opposites. Humans began to understand that there were alternatives to immediate violent response, that sometimes patience and diplomacy could achieve what force could not. It was not always smooth. There were disagreements and cultural misunderstandings. Some collective species remained suspicious of human aggression. Some humans grew frustrated with collective bureaucracy and endless debates. But both sides kept working at it, kept trying to bridge the gap because both sides recognized the value of what they were building together. Feltara's logs from this period would later become essential historical documents, providing insight into the early days of human collective integration. But one entry in particular captured the essence of what was happening. Day 247 of the Integration Initiative. Today I watched human Marines training collective security forces in combat tactics. The collective officers were hesitant at first, uncomfortable with the aggressive techniques. But the human instructor, a Sergeant Rodriguez, was patient and explained the reasoning behind each move. By the end of the session, the collective officers were not just learning the techniques, they were understanding the philosophy. They were learning that violence, when absolutely necessary, can be a tool of protection rather than destruction. Later I attended a meditation session led by a Zephrani spiritual guide, with several human officers participating. They struggled with the stillness at first, these humans who are always moving, always doing. But they persevered, and by the end they were achieving moments of true inner peace. They were learning that strength comes not just from action, but also from contemplation and self-understanding. This is what integration truly means. Not one side dominating the other, but both sides learning, growing, becoming more than they were alone. The collective is teaching humanity to value peace. Humanity is teaching the collective to defend that peace. Together we are becoming something new, something better. The galaxy believed that Death World survivors like humans would be too aggressive, too dangerous to integrate into peaceful civilizations. But we are proving them wrong. Humans are not destroying our peace. They are protecting it. And in return we are teaching them that there is more to existence than survival. This is the future I hope for. Not human, not Zephrani, Not any single species, but all of us together, learning from each other, protecting each other, reaching for the stars as one. Years later, when historians studied the formation of what would become known as the United Collective, they would point to the Battle of Talnara IV as the turning point. The day when humanity proved that Deathworld survivors could be heroes as well as warriors. The day when the collective learned that peace required strength as well as good intentions. But for Veltara and Elizabeth sitting in that observation lounge watching the stars, it was simply the beginning of a friendship that would span decades. A friendship between two species that came from very different worlds but found common ground in their shared desire to make the galaxy a better, safer place. The Zafrani database entry on humanity was updated one final time. Species, human, Homo sapiens. Homeworld, Earth, Class 12 Deathworld. Classification, Deathworld survivor species threat level, extreme, to enemies of the collective. Recommended status, ally and full member. Special notes. Despite originating from a planet that should have prevented the evolution of intelligence, humans have not only survived but thrived. They possess exceptional adaptability, creativity, and determination. While capable of extreme violence, humans primarily use their abilities to protect rather than destroy. They are warriors when necessary, but philosophers, artists, and dreamers by choice. The collective is honored to count humanity among its members and looks forward to learning from their unique perspective on survival, strength, and the true meaning of peace. The galaxy would never be quite the same after humans entered it, but perhaps that was a good thing. After all, the universe was a dangerous place. It was good to have friends who knew how to survive in dangerous places. Friends who would stand beside you when darkness came. Friends who had learned, through countless generations of struggle on a deadly world, that the best way to face impossible odds was together. That was the human gift to the collective. Not just weapons or tactics or Deathworld resilience, but the fundamental understanding that survival was not enough, that life was meant to be lived fully, protected fiercely, and shared generously. And in return, the collective gave humanity something they had been seeking since they first looked up at the stars. A place to belong. A family larger than any single species. A future where human children would grow up knowing they were part of something vast and wonderful, where the strength their ancestors had earned through suffering could be used to protect rather than destroy. It was, all parties agreed, a fair exchange. And so the story of humanity's first contact with alien warships ended.